Now, for our next set of speakers, please welcome Andy Dunn, founder and CEO of Bonobos, and Jason Del Rey, senior editor at Recode.
Alexander Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, we are waiting in the wings for you, waiting in the wings. You never back down, you never learn to take your time.
This is so funny.
Alexander Hamilton,
So did you know, Andy, did you know they were playing Hamilton for you?
We're actually just going to be doing several songs. So we know it's Wednesday and it's late, so we're just going to do a few a cappella, and we'll go from there.
So I was kidding around with my colleagues last night that Shop Talk knows how to make a journalist feel self-conscious. They put him on stage 8:30 in the morning after a big night in Vegas alongside the CEO of a men's fashion company who dresses like the CEO of a men's fashion company.
You're too kind.
So,
come on.
Looking good this morning. So first if there's a few people in the audience who might not know Bonobos is, I'm going to try to do my description, and then you tell me what I got right and wrong.
Perfect.
So about an 8 or 9-year-old company, started off making men's pants for men who have, you might call them athletic builds. When I was an 80s baby, they called it husky pants, but better fitting.
Hockey butt.
Hockey
butt is the other way to put it.
I played soccer, not hockey. And then since then, you've expanded not only in the type of apparel you sell, but also where you sell it, not only online.
Yep.
How'd I do?
You did great. My version would be emojis. So I will do a pair of pants, then a rocket ship, then a shirt, and a flower. That's generally what I do. And then sometimes I finish it with lightning, but only if I'm feeling overconfident that day, which is most days.
So let's do it in words very quickly.
Well, we got started with this basic idea that men's pants don't fit. So if you've ever taken off your belt and you've noticed the way that your belt starts to curve as you wear it, our pant is actually made with that curved waistband. And so what that does is it comes up around your seat in your thigh. And so what we wanted to do was offer that amazing top fit in as many sizes as we could, and it was 2007. So we said, why don't we build this brand on the internet? So we kind of checked our research and we said, who's built a brand on the internet before? And the answer was nobody. I later learned that maybe ASOS was the first digitally native vertical brand that had ever been built out of the UK. We said, why don't we build Bonobos with the internet as the primary engine for transacting, storytelling, and communicating with the customer? And in so doing, be able to offer a ton more fit, much better customer service, and ultimately a bundle of fit and service that hadn't before been seen in menswear. So we spent 4 years proving that out. We doubled the business every year. And then in our 4th year, we woke up and said, wait a second, these e-commerce only brands are never going to make money. So if we want to make money, we've got to find a way to expand the channels. And we invented what I think is the retail store of the future, which we call a guide shop. You come in, you get fitted, you try it on, we ship it to you. Now we have 21 of those, and we've expanded to things like shirts and suits.
So you happen to be, I'm always amazed when an entrepreneur is also a bit of a prolific writer, and from time to time, you have been known to put out some really smart, thoughtful stuff about both the challenges of e-commerce and the opportunity. So just this week, you wrote a piece that talked about what you call, I may get it wrong, digitally native vertical brands.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, I'm not going to...
DNVBs.
Yeah, that abbreviation doesn't roll off the tip of the tongue. But and the idea was companies like your own, companies like, there's a long list now, but the big names people know, Warby Parker. In the mattress category, there's Casper and Tufted Needle.
Dollar Shave Club.
Dollar Shave Club. These part of what you were writing about was that these are different than traditional retailers and traditional e-commerce companies that we knew maybe in Web 1.0 and 2.0. And also, it seemed like you think your companies are undervalued by investors. That was the subtext I saw was, we're not valued properly. Some of you guys just don't get what we're about.
I wouldn't say that at all. I wouldn't say that they're undervalued. I think some of them are very hotly valued, and I think depending on where you look in the Bonobos life cycle, I could be on either side of overvalued or undervalued from a pure kind of cynical, maybe pragmatic investor standpoint. I think the mistake comes when you paint the whole thing as e-commerce, because I think they're apples and oranges. I think selling third-party brands is very different than building a vertical brand. And I think we're discovering that vertical business as we speak. You know, one of my favorite quotes, pioneers get the arrow, settlers get the gold. I feel like Bonobos has been along for that ride for a long time. When we started, we would thought we were pure play. And now we have
pure play meaning just e-commerce.
pure play on e-commerce. And then we discovered e-commerce is a challenging business for all the reasons that Jerry Storch talked about when we kicked this whole conference off. So what we've discovered is that by owning a brand and then by developing a digitally native approach where the stores can be reimagined as all about a great experience, you can build the great vertical brands of the future. And so when you think about Lululemon, I think about Nike, I think about Under Armour. In some regards, I think about Apple, even Tesla. These are the cohort of kinds of brands that I think about, and that ultimately I think one day when our businesses are at scale, the public cohort of investors will think about, not third-party e-commerce where we've seen a lot of failures because, let's be honest, there's not enough margin in the category usually to compete with the big grizzly bear Amazon.
Right. So not if it's not about being undervalued, but it's about sort of raising up this category of companies and saying, give it. I read it as give us time. We haven't seen a big exit, an IPO, or a big acquisition from one of these companies, but give us time and you will see the value in this group of companies.
Exactly. I think it's a movement. You know, I think that Jerry did a lot of Star Wars references and he put the store strike back. I think it's the digitally native vertical brands, you know, are going to kind of come up now. And I think, you know, I just tried to make a list and it was 65 brands. And it's like the first inning. And when you think about vertical retail, you know, back in the day when Mickey Drexler decided to start selling Gap jeans at a Gap store, I mean, they were selling Levi's jeans and records. And now we have Zara. Now we have IKEA. You know, now we have H&M, Uniqlo. We have all of the West Elm brands, Victoria's Secret. Think about how much market cap and what % of the consumer retail economy has been covered by vertical brands in the offline era. I think something at least as formidable is going to happen in the online era as the world reorganizes from an automobile, which we spent 100 years organizing around, to a smartphone, which I think we're going to spend the next 100 years organizing around.
How much of building a brand, a digitally native brand, is about, in some ways, trying to control your destiny a bit more in a world that Amazon just continues to eat up?
You know, it's funny, we point to Amazon so much. I don't think that other people that you sell through are necessarily any easier to compete with or deal with. You know, we picked what I view to be the key exception, which is Nordstrom. And so we've done a partnership.
Key exception because they're an investor?
Key exception, meaning we invited them to become an investor because the fact that we think they care about the customer, they care about customer service, and they're really good, fair people, which I think in the world of third-party branded selling is hard to find. And so my view is that if you look at the market, we're going to see a lot of third-party branded offline sellers that are going to struggle. Many are going to go out of business. We're going to see legacy vertical retailers that are oriented to offline with huge store legacy infrastructure that are also going to go out of business. And I think the future burns bright for Amazon, of course, for digitally native vertical brands, and then for people who come from the quote-unquote traditional world who have the conviction to evolve their model. And I would include a Nordstrom in that bucket. I don't worry much for strong brands. You know, I don't think anyone's worried about Nike, right, or Under Armour or some of the other brands that I named. But it requires a conviction, I think, to either disrupt yourself or to be a new entrant and recognize this is going to be a 30-year process, and we're going to wake up and the world is going to look unbelievably different. I mean, when we started Bonobos in 2007, people thought I was out of my mind that we were going to build a brand on the internet, and now that's where more or less every single brand gets started.
A lot of your brand, like a bunch of these digitally native brands, started e-commerce first for several years, and then several have now taken different paths toward physical retail.
Yeah.
Yours is called a guide shop, where
Yeah.
you're not actually walking out with an item, but you're getting fitted and ordering and purchasing an item.
Yeah.
One way to look at this is you realize that the ceiling to growth online was maybe a little lower than you thought.
Yeah.
Is there a flip side that's more accurate than my assumption?
It's a fantastic question. For me, it was more the realization that the consumer experience is not as good if the customer can't touch and feel and see the product and try it on. Meaning that we were telling ourselves a story that the Bonobos experience was better because it was an online-only story, and we were lying to ourselves. Because once we put a couple of fitting rooms in our lobby and we started prototyping it, people were having a great time trying on the product, figuring out what fit them. The insight was they didn't necessarily care if we sent them with the product that they purchased. So they were placing orders, walking out, and going back to work, and going on to dinner, or going out for the night. And that was the magical moment for me when I realized everything I've ever been told in the industry about instant gratification is not necessarily true. It's not.
So we're going to go talk to Bastian, who was just up here, about Postmates.
Well, look, I think if you need food or you need a personal care product, right? I mean, that can be urgent.
Yep.
But if it's a shirt, you don't eat your shirt, right? So it's not obvious that you need to walk out with it. And what we've seen is that 5% of our customers come in and want something right away. Someone who spilled wine on their shirt needs a tie for an interview. And the conversion rate on that 5% is the same as it is on the other 95%. So it was a customer experience-driven innovation. And then what we saw as we looked at the economics is, wait a second, stores can be unbelievably profitable. And we were able to look back at our digital business and pull back on some of the marketing investment and the technology investment that most people are saying, let's go gangbusters with that. And we were able to say, let's kind of figure out the mixture of growth and profitability so that we can build an enduring business.
And the guide shops are able to be profitable because you're not carrying a lot of inventory?
It helps a lot because the productivity is so high in that box. I mean, if you go to our guide shop at Armitage Street in Lincoln Park, it's an 800 square foot store. We're doing somewhere between 2.5, 3 million out of that store. And it's just cranking that productivity because you've got the full assortment selling with the highest possible customer service offering. So if it's funny, people are excited about ship from store, but what if you could reimagine a store and say you don't even have to have the inventory there? I mean, even the word is from a verb, which is to store inventory. But what if it wasn't a store and it was actually a place where you could just get a great service experience? And so I think that's where we're going to see, it doesn't have to be the way that it works for us, but I think we're certainly going to see less inventory, smaller footprints, and great customer service and great experience.
So a couple of years ago, your company has now raised over, I think, 120 million in venture capital. Is that right?
That's right.
And 2 years ago, raised over 50 million.
That's right.
And at the time, I believe you had 10 guide shops nationally.
Yeah.
Today you have 21.
21, yep.
I think when you raised the money, you said you would open 30 more, which would bring us to 40.
Yeah.
What happened there, or are you still on that trajectory?
Yeah, so we're going to open 11 more, we think, this year. We'll finish the year with 32. That's our fiscal year, which ends in January. And then, that 40 number will be there, we think, sometime in 2017. And then we think we'll read the data. But my sense is that we can go deeper and deeper into America with this. Part of what I love about building out the guide shop model is you discover the beauty of this country and you go to its different cities and you kind of feel the local flavor and you see the way that Bonobos can work. I was just in our Austin, Texas store and how different that is from our store in La Brea in Los Angeles. And then what we're seeing from the data science team that we've built is there's a small early cannibalization to the web business for the first kind of 12 to 18 months, and then the market really starts to take off. And so with that multi-year model, I wouldn't be surprised if we're aiming at 80 or 100 stores before long.
What's the size of the business today?
No comment.
No comment. Okay, so I could just make up a number, and so let's say 80 or 90 million in revenue. Would that be under or overselling you?
What'd you do last night?
I don't remember. It's Vegas.
I was playing poker last night. I played the 2-5 table and I won.
Okay. So I'm fine with silence. So.
No, look. At some point, we'd love to share what we're up to. I mean, we're excited about the momentum. Is the party line, and what we're doing that I think is a little bit different than some of our peers is we're equally focused on growth and profitability at Bonobos, and we believe it's a very important time to prove that you can build an enduring business. I think the reality is that while a lot of venture capital has flowed into the sector, and while I'm really excited about the digitally native vertical model, this is retail. These are not software companies. And
So
so
they take a really long time to build.
they take a long time to build, and ultimately profits matter. And by the way, ultimately cash flow matters. And so we're focused on the balance across that.
Profitability has become like the sexiest word in like Silicon Valley and startup world, which is so weird, but also because the definition of profitability across companies is wild. So,
Well, we panicked in 2011. So our panic was 2011 because we had an online-driven business that was growing, but where the growth was increasing and the loss rate was increasing at the same time. And to me, that is the definition of something that is going to only endure if you continue to raise more and more and more and more and more equity in perpetuity. So we've been focused on it for 5 years, I think, in terms of realizing we had an asset that was exciting, but let's build an enduring asset. And as the first DNVB in the market, I feel a responsibility to the whole movement to prove that we can build something that endures.
how far off are we from seeing one of these brands potentially IPO? And I ask that because I've heard some from people in the New York startup scene that you've occasionally tossed around the idea of how great would it be if a few of us could combine into one holding company. Maybe we could eliminate some costs on the back end, and that would give us a better shot at a public offering.
So at Bonobos, we like to run experiments to resolve questions like this. So one experiment we ran once was let's put fitting rooms in our lobby, and that becomes the guide shops. Another experiment we once ran was let's try suiting. Now suiting and shirting together are bigger than our pants business if you look at the overall business. The experiment that we ran where we saw a challenge to doing it was building another brand in-house. So we launched a women's brand called AYR. And the brand did well, but it was hard to distort resources toward the brand. So we actually are in the process of spinning that brand out. So I'm now more of the mind that one company, one brand is enough for one company.
Got it. So no conglomerate of Bonobos and XYZ other vertically native brand.
I don't think at this
joining
point
force.
in the life cycle, anything but a relentless focus makes sense.
How much does having Nordstrom as an investor limit your options going forward in terms of potential sales in the future or sort of liquidity events for your investors?
It's been huge, actually, for us, Nordstrom. I mean, it's become a big business there. We're the fastest growing men's brand launched in a long time there. We're the #1 chino. We're the #1 short. That business is actually delivering cash flow to fund our growth in a lot of ways. So we're super excited about the partnership as we structured it. From a corporate perspective, they're about a 5% owner in the business. They don't have a board of directors seat, although they would make wonderful, board members if we had them because they know so much about retail. We don't think it limits us.
Do you think about or worry about continuing to explain to consumers what Bonobos stands for as you grow and do new things? Because I used to think of it as or what you would like to think, the great fitting pants company.
Yeah.
And now I'm not quite sure
Yeah.
what the one thing is. Is there one thing that you stand for?
It started with a one thing, which was a great fitting pant. And from a benefits perspective, what we hope it now begins to stand for is this idea of fit, service, and fun in menswear. From a spiritual standpoint, though, I call it the evolution of mankind starting with pants, right? Which is this concept that we reinvented the fit of your clothes, we reinvented how you shop for your clothes, now we're reinventing the very way that you think about a physical retail experience. What might we do next, right? And so the question is how can you address the narrowest possible brand vision and have that reach the widest possible audience? And so it's something we're working on this year. We're hiring a new chief marketing officer. We're really focused on the brand story. We're going to put out a bunch of new creative that hopefully will clarify it because we actually feel some of those issues ourselves, part of the growing pains. And the way we think about it is, Brooks Brothers launched in 1818. Ralph Lauren launched in 1967. Those are the only two brands in the last 200 years launched out of America that have made it to $1 billion of sales in what I would call the premium mass men's space. And so we think we have a chance to be in that cohort, and therefore are saying to our team internally, this kind of opportunity only comes up once in 100 years.
I think we probably have time for one last question. And I don't know how many people know, but at some point in the last few years, you gave up the CEO role for 87 days?
Last summer, yeah.
And you came back very quickly.
Yeah.
What did you learn in that time, and what happened there?
I was burnt out. I spent 8 years building the brand. I made that comment about pioneers getting the arrows. I felt like we took a lot of arrows, raised a lot of capital, been through a couple of business model evolutions, went through a couple of business and friendship issues. My co-founder left the business in 2009, went on to create the Trunk Club, did a fabulous job with that. But it takes a toll. And after 8 years, I kind of came to our board and I said, hey, we have a chance to bring on a mentor of mine who can run the company as our CEO. I'll step into the exec chairman seat. And I was told that it's kind of 50-50 with a new CEO. And in fact, we were on one of the 250s. It didn't really take, it didn't really work. We had a great conversation, and I kind of came back from a summer away and felt rejuvenated and came back in. And so, the learning has been be focused, focus on one brand. I mentioned to you I used to do some investing outside the company, have ramped that down, and just get the reporting structure of the company set up in such a way that it's a more manageable day-to-day job, and really evolve from founder to professional CEO myself, which is a personal challenge. And so that's the challenge that I've taken on.
So you're the CEO now and until when? We're all friends here.
I can't say now and forever because we all are aware of the frailty of the human body, but having an amazing time and hoping to build an enduring brand.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, leave me hanging.
Thank you, Jason and Andy.